The Ouverts. Why are they laughing at us? And who are they? The Anachronism documentary. Within this documentary, we will be discussing the basins of the world. In a video that I did a couple of days ago, I spoke about the Great Basin. Basically, I spoke about the Caspian Sea, which is a basin that spans across the northern section of the world. The Caspian Sea is an endorheic basin, which basically means that it is porous. It traps in any moisture that comes into it. If it rains, if it snows, it's going to suck it up, and it goes down into the earth through seepage. And in its definition, it says that there is no outward flow to the ocean, although some people try to say that it is. There is no proof of outward flow to the ocean, which makes it an endorheic basin. There are numerous basins across the world, including the Great Basin, which happens to cover almost half of the continent of the United States. It nearly covers the entire western portion of the United States. Hence the reason why, as I stated, endorheic basins pull in moisture, water, snow. It evaporates it or it pulls it into the earth through a process called seepage. So that is one of the reasons why the west coast of the United States is so dry and more prone to heat and dryness due to its large basin system. One of the systems of a basin is it has the ability to create mountains and stretch the seafloor. Basically, hypothetically, theoretically, it aids in the reconstruction of the earth, causing ever expanding, stretching land. Because as mountains form, the seafloor spreads, and that adds to additional land. Mountains are plains, or all of the three over and over again, just like you were playing Sims. The Great Basin and the Basin and Range province stretches the earth crust, creating many north to south trending mountain ranges. So as those mountains trend from the north to the south, they extend horizontally, which again spreads the seabed. These mountain ranges are separated by flat valleys and more basins and more mountains. This basin system is a process of the earth, which entails condensation and evaporation. Again, some people think that the water within basins eventually seep out into another ocean, but that is theoretically incorrect based on the documented definition for the word endorheic basin. But one of the cool features about basins, especially the endorheic ones, is that they are landlocked. So just like you have the Great Basin, which basically covers the full west coast of North America, adjacent to that, because the lines run parallel, sort of like a rail line, the Great Basin rail lines, adjacent to the Great Basin of the Americas, as well as to the west of Russia, you have the Aleutian Islands. And by parallel, I mean lying or moving in the same direction, but always the same distance apart. Parallel lines, just like train tracks. And most basins are very close, as I stated, adjacent to mountain ridges. That is a system. The mountain ridges, of course, comes from those continental plates coming up against one another, causing mountain rises and sea spread. This also is one of the prime reasons, secondary to the basin pulling in all of the moisture, and the reason that Nevada and California and parts of the West Coast are so dry is that it lies on, of course, not only basins, but they also have a lot of earthquakes. And that's because along the basins, which are adjacent to and are landlocked, next over from that, you have where it begins to create more seafloor spread due to the volcanoes and the earthquakes. All of that is shifting around the continental plate as well as the seafloor, causing continental rising and continental sloping, starting from the abyssal plain. And so when people say the earth is not a plane, we're not saying plane as in Plane. We're saying plane as in Plain. And the earth is a plane because its baseline starts up into the slope, which we would call the elevation point, the abyssal plain, which is a horizontal baseline. The Ross Sea is allegedly our southernmost sea. And to the west of that is Ross Island and Victoria Island. Now, the Ross Ice Shelf is said to be 200 miles from the South Pole, but actually it moves as north as the equator. So, Victoria Land operates a great section of the West Coast, southwest. And to your east, you would have the Rawson Island as well as the Basin. And then you have the Northern Basin to the west of Victoria Land. Well, to the east of Victoria Land, you have the Central Trough. You have the Ross Sea. You have the Eastern Basin. And then you also have, to your far east, the Marie Byrd Land. Interestingly enough, they call that Marie Byrd. Of course, that is a nod to Admiral Byrd. And if you don't know who General Admiral Byrd is, he is a highly decorated, or was, still is, past or present, a highly decorated veteran, aeronautics professional. He basically was one of the people who were sent to, along with his crew, to Antarctica, where this mystical story is about that he was drawn into somewhere and he met with this being of kind of like an underground cavern or another type of place. And I honestly believe that story because as I've been stating to you all about the way that the basin system works as far as a reconstruction of the planet's geographical feature, it makes a lot of sense why he would say that when he flew over Antarctica before or in a certain region, he didn't see any of the lush gardens or any of the seas or the mountains or any of the stuff that he's seen on the alleged mission that he went on. Like they were just newfound land. And one of the interesting thing about that is the sim scenario that I use when talking about the tectonic plates and how they relate to mountain ridges and how they relate to basins as they align with faults as well as they align with rifts and ice shelves in the form again of adjacent lines like the mountains line that leads from the north to the south, which pretty much runs into the Ross Sea. Again, those tectonic plates go together, cause mountain rise, and horizontal to that is causing sea spreading. So you have a mountain going up, and then it's coming down, forming a plain, and it's going up again. It's just a constant thing. There may be some distance. Once the mountain, of course, slopes downward, it may be some distance where the ridges or whatever are underwater. but eventually they will begin to rise again. So it's basically a never ending run of mountains, although it appears to you on the surface that they're distances apart. This is actually the same land mass, or if you want to call it sea mass, reproducing itself over and over and spreading. Kind of like a parasite in a way. Or an extremely advanced video game relative to or made up in the form of the game The Sims. And there's also another game that I'm going to tell you all about towards the end of the documentary that is very relevant to this subject. It's going to shock you. Now, the Ross Sea itself overlays a continental shelf. And of course, like I said, the topographic plain, abyssal plain, is underwater plain on the deep ocean floor. And the deep ocean floor is what we call the seabed. And it slopes upward towards the continents and becomes in from the deep to shallow. So that goes along with the continental rise from deep to shallow and the continental slope and the expansion of the seabed. Now, abyssal plains cover more than 50% of the Earth's surface and are flat and smooth in geographical context. Majority of abyssal plains are also not explored due to the darkness and water pressure. So, of course, the water pressure is way higher, like hundreds of times higher. The further you go in the ground, the further in the ocean and the sea of the depths that you go. And the Ross Sea itself, again, which overlays a continental shelf, it is 500 meters in depth, the Ross Sea. So that's pretty deep. Of course, they can't go that far down, but they would love to, of course, which I stated, which is why a lot of drilling missions are going on in Antarctica right now. They want to go those depths because the further they go in depth, the more things they may seem to find, such as antiquities or antiques, or more land by going further east or further west through or over the mountain ranges, the underground mountain ranges and ridges. Because again, when mountains are formed, there is sea spreading. Sea spreading occurs, and if you have an area such as allegedly a spear, which has a circumference, if there is more and more sea spread, the NIWA, which is the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, operates both national and international matters. It was allegedly established in 1992, and one of their jobs is to monitor networks, databases, and collections. So they operate primarily in the southern regions, but they also operate towards the east and the west and some northern regions as well. They have basically set a limit saying that there cannot be any expansion. So even though you know that there is a process called sea level spread, they maintain that the limits and the boundaries of the seabed cannot be pushed. That is a contradiction. They proclaim the Paleogene and Neogene age faulting and extension is restricted to Victoria Land and the Northern Basin. Again, that wouldn't make sense because the seabed itself is lower than those regions and it has to spread. But where does it spread to? When it comes to the seafloor spreading, they have a problem with that because it means that the Earth's size would expand horizontally. But they have no problem saying that there is a bulge in the middle of a spherical globe. So what is the difference between land expanding to the east or the west? There is no difference other than they know that the sky will have to literally collapse if the bulge continued to spread. That means that your sky will become lower because you have basically a sphere that is spreading out into another three-dimensional object where, of course, the northern and the southern latitude would actually shrink and the east and the west would actually expand, making for much hotter days, I would say, or much colder. Because the atmosphere itself is nothing but gases and cannot expand or spread in a physical manner, then I will go with the latter, which is the seabed spreading from the east to the west or some horizontal coordinate direction. Basins are basically graben systems, or I would say graben systems, which mean basically to grab in. The word is spelled Graben, but I'm going to use it as two words, as in Grabin system. Grab in. Of course, because it grabs in all of the moisture, the snow, or the rain, which is why it is called grab in system. So all of the basins basically around the world are pulling in moisture from certain areas, and that the moisture and the precipitation, maybe even the elements they are pulling in are being pulled in for a reason more than that is known to us at that time, but I will go further into that in this documentary. Now, a graben is in the Afar depression, which is the Afar triangle. The Afar triangle distance nearly encompasses the whole earth, and it also sits above north of the Ross Sea, as well as the international or the continental ice shelf that the Ross Sea sits above. So there is a fault line there. Of course, that fault line is going to be adjacent to the Ross ice shelf, as well as the basins. And this train track pattern repeats across our whole entire earth over and over and over again, as it continuously causes uprises of mountains and sea spreading, which brings more land in the expansion or reconstruction of the earth process, which is why I now call our planet the ever expanding earth. So now that you understand how basins work and how they relate to mountain ridges, plains, sea level expansion, sedimentary fill, and crustal extension are, we're going to move on to the next thing. But be sure to note the NIWA, which is the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, is one of the pioneers in the department of, if you want to know more about the seabed expansion, basically not expanding, even though we know it does, but they've set limitations. And I actually ended up going to one of their websites where I tried to log in regard to the area and size and coordinates and distances of the Ross Sea. And that website was niwa.co.nz/fisheries with FISHERIES / the Ross Sea / traffic model / about the Ross Sea. And I was not able to log in. To find out more about the western side of Victoria Land and the eastern side of Marie Byrd Land. They would have that information that I am looking to gather in the future. Although they say that there is a limitation, clearly there cannot be due to seabed spreading. Especially when you take the Ross Sea, the Ross Ice Shelf, the Ross Sea basins, and the Graben, which is in the Afar Depression, the Afar Triangle. There is a lot of sea spreading, mountain creating activity going on in the southern region. Hence again, the warring basically over the observation and drilling locations down there, because they are drilling sorry about that, because they are drilling not only to see about global climate change, as they say, they are also drilling to find antiquities. As I would say, they allegedly found many years ago in the Afar Triangle Depression, where they allegedly found the first fossil specimens of the earliest humanoids. So that is where they got that Africa basically is the cradle of the earth, because for one, geographically it is centered upon the 0 degree equator point, as well as the highest mountains there, and basically more so over. They just feel like it is the center point. But that does not mean necessarily, in my opinion, that that is where those specimens came from, because of course, also in the Southern Ocean, aside of all of the mountain ridges being created on a constant and the constant sea bed expansion, you also have the southern circumpolar conveyor belt system. And of course, you all know the Southern Ocean is basically the pioneer, most strongest ocean that is doing a whole lot of that circumnavigating of our waters. So of course, you know that they were saying that people were trying to circumnavigate Antarctica, but it was taking them like months, if not years. And of course, if you place my analogy onto that, as well as Admiral Byrd's about the fact that he didn't see land before when he went there, then he went back time over, then he seen more water or more mountains or more land, whatever the case was, that would be a very plausible reason. This basinistic, porous, mountainous, tectonic, reconstructional, earthbound, landbound system of creation, due to the strong currents of that Southern Ocean conveyor belt. Of course, those specimens could have came from anywhere, basically. Even the far, far, far east and the far, far, far west that spin keep hitting, apparently. If you look at the earth in the realm of technology, as I do, and will further break down in future documentaries, if it were like an advanced game of The Sims, basically our earth would be considered maybe the old earth. A lot of people be talking about the new earth, the new earth. If this was the start of the earth, which is, you know, the continents and everything that we know about our earth basically as we know it, if the earth is expanding, the seabed is expanding, then this will be the old earth, and the expanding seabed, land and the ocean and the waters that are expanding with it would be considered the new world. We would still be here in the old world. Or of course, this could be the new world, and out there, past those, i.e. limitations that they have set that does not comply with the laws of geography, could in fact be the old land, which is why Again, they are digging and mining for antiquities because the things that they are finding should not be found in the age or the time frame that we are in right now. That is basically what an antiquity is. Even the UN, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, name it the raw sea underneath as a continental shelf. The legal definition of a continental shelf is the stretch of the seabed adjacent to the shores of a particular country to which it belongs. So it does, the process does have a legal definition as the stretch of the seabed adjacent to the shores of a particular country to which it belongs. All of this is, again, adjacent like train tracks and a process in itself. Basins create mountains and stretches the seafloor. Now for part 2 of the documentary, we will be getting into the etymology as well as the origins of the word basin, because if you follow the origin of words, you will greater understand the people that influence the word, the processes, and everything around it. So the word basin, Basin, means to sieve, 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 which is Old Norse, Nordic, Scandinavian, North Germanic dialect, spoken by the Scandinavians and overseas settlers, and chronologically coincide with the Christianization of the Scandinavians. Not only the Christianization of them, also the incoming influence of democracy. It was also spoken by the Scandinavian kingdoms from about the 7th to the 15th century. So the word basin again is relative and means to sieve, Sieve, and the word sieve is very old. It is like an ancient word, meaning that people were basically sieving or knew what to sieve were, knew something about the basin system even a very, very long time ago, literally centuries ago. And we're just learning about them today, and some people still in their minds, I think, believe that they are craters, which I believe are incorrect. They're basins, dried out, just like Nevada appears. That big old opening that they called a crater was called by a meteorite. There is no fragments. There is no proof of that. Do you know how large of a meteor that would be? Parts of it would still literally be sticking out of the ground. Unless, of course, that meteor isn't, that crater isn't from a meteor at all. Unless it's a basin. So maybe the meteor went through the basin because, where is it exactly? The word Saif also have origins in Ireland, Isle of Man. You all know that is very far west. Normandy's, Newfoundland, Great Britain, and places in between used this, and it allegedly evolved from Norseman Proto-Norse. And again, basin means to saive. It means scatter. It means porous. It also is relative to air and smell. Of course, you have moisture in the air. And as I stated earlier, basins absorb moisture. They absorb rain. They absorb snow. And who knows what other elements they absorb because they are porous. So everything basically comes down into the pores of it. And if, of course, there were a hollow earth, basins would be perfect for them because it would explain how they're able to get rain, how they're able to get moisture, how they probably could even get snow. I mean, it evaporates, but it's seeping through there as well. All of it does not evaporate. That's what they want to tell you, but it actually seeps into the Earth's crust and does not allegedly go again towards outside of its perimeter. It just goes down. Nobody knows where it goes exactly. And it could be, of course, lining the seabed. Of course, that water will build up pressure, and you would think that it would come back up. So it doesn't. There's no outflow. It's going somewhere. And if I was living underground, I could use that moisture. I can use all of those elements that those pores are pulling in, because again, we don't know what all pores basins pull in. They just are equating it to fluids such as water or snow or droplets. They don't understand, I think, on an advanced level that those may actually be pulling in other elements like oxygen. Of course, oxygen is in the water itself. So think about that for a minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you how Anachronism relates to basins as far as in the past, the present, and the near future. And anachronism is a thing belonging to or appropriate to a period other than that in which it exists, especially a thing that is conspicuously old-fashioned. Bringing back again to light, as I brought forth to you all earlier, hence and antiquity. And it is basically an act of attributing a custom, event, or object to a period to which it does not belong. Now, when you say antiques or antiquity, you automatically think this is something old. But the act, one definition stated the thing that it was. It is a thing that is conspicuously old-fashioned, and also can be a thing belonging or appropriate to a period other than which it exists. So that it is as a two-way definition. Also, in the action part, which is what it does instead of what it is an act of attributing a custom, event, or object to a period to which it does not belong. So that means that if you were to find a cell phone back in 19 BCE or something, of course that would be an anachronism or an antiquity. But what if you actually ended up finding something that you know shouldn't exist for decades or centuries to come? That too can be an anachronism. So I'm wondering, of course, with all of the drilling that has been going on in the Southern Ocean, as I spoke about earlier, if they could possibly find some things that are much older or even much more advanced. Let me know also in the comments, guys, do you think we are in the old world or the new world? Geographically, based on the seabed expansion theory. And I don't even know if we can call it an theory, because I already told you all how it is a legal definition as determined by the United Nations. Again, basin means to save, which is a foreign origin word. Long time ago, again, Norse. It also means to strain, and it can also mean to scatter. So basically it's saying if something was to come down into a basin, it is being strained, and it's only taking what they want. So think about earlier when I said, how do they know that it's not taking all type of elements that are in the atmosphere? They don't know. But somehow, based on the origin and the etymology of and the seeming process of a basin, it is able to save or strand whatever it wants to. If it wants water, if it wants air, if it wants iron, if it wants whatever is in the air, it can choose from like it's thinking which type of element it actually wants. Hence the word strand or strain. It also means to scatter. So as whatever particles is going down in the basin, once they come down, they scatter. And there's also relevancy to the word Schaterian. And this is an extension to the word skey, which is Skey, which is a Proto-Indo-European word meaning to split or scatter. And of course, basin seems to be openings within the ground. That's all they are. They don't have to necessarily be in the form of a split. A lot of them actually are. And they seem to scatter as well throughout the earth, all over, even in large areas such as the Great Basin in the western portion of the United States. And as far south as the Ross Island basins and the entire system, including the triangle in that area. As well as the abyssal plains run for about 50% over the earth. Well, across the earth, the abyssal plains run, and allegedly they are only 50% of our land. But if sea expansion is real, which by legal definition it is, then that abyssal plain may be basically naturally or calculated to always keep a portion of 50%, and maybe the rest of that 50% is continuously going outwards as a result of the sedimentary, depositional, and erosional process in the surface of the earth above sea level, known as the seabed, which is shaped by volcanic tectonic plates. In Low Germany, Schateran means to burst out laughing. And that is where I got my title from. Again, this documentary is about Anachronism and how it relates to basins. And so, again, basin can mean to scatter, to split, or to cut. And in Low German, Schaterin, which is an extension, of course, of the word basin, means to burst out laughing. I found that very weird. Why would Low German Schaterin, Schateran, mean to burst out laughing? What's so funny? And I think what's funny is that we are being played. There is a whole entire world. Basically the earth has its own mind and it's doing its own thing, and we're just sitting here thinking that everything is as it is. Like the earth cannot change geologically. And that is incorrect, and that is wrong for them to portray, and then also say in the same breath, give legal definitions to the actual contradiction of it all when it comes to their supposed limitations. Now, we have in ancient Greece the word Hellas, and that is also relevant to the word or relative to the word basin. So why would you relate the word Hellas, Hellas, to the word basin? Of course, one would think that that would equal the word hell. And because basins are porous and things go down in the direction of what one may see or think automatically to be hell, that is the relative thing for it. Also, it means Mediterranean civilization. Is relative to that, as well as the Death Valley. So all of that right there is very weird. It's definitely giving people down beneath the basins, and I don't know if somehow they're using that as a form of transportation. You all know the things that we have been citing, like something I stated earlier that they seen, like orbs flying past the ISS, like a fleet of them past the southwest point, which there should be a basically you should be going around a curve at that point if the earth was a globe, but clearly you could see on that video that the earth is looking pretty stationary, and those orbs or those 3, 4, 5, 6 dimensional modes of transportation or whatever they were headed from the north to the south past the southwestern corner of Antarctica, basically off the stream where you can see darkness at. When in fact, that shouldn't be, if the ISS is supposed to be going around. Where did that dark space over there go to? Because it was not space. It was actually an extension to Antarctica waters, to be exact. Moreover, to the southwest corner. Also, during the Dark Ages of the 12th through the 9th century BC, now we're taking this etymology and the origin of the word basin, which means to save, to scatter, or to strain, to a whole nother level. In the Dark Ages of the 12th through 9th centuries BC to the end of the classical Antiquity era, there were allegedly only about 600 cities/states. Now, again, as we are taking the word basin all the way back to its origins, we have made it all the way to the Dark Ages. And it is talking about antiquities, like the antiquities I told you that could possibly be circulated from one place to another or coming in from one place. Which is why they're doing secondary, allegedly, to climate change. A lot of the drilling that's going on in the southern regions, and more reasons why they're doing that. The Dark Age synonym for the word, the Dark Age word synonym for the word basin means police, which is very interesting. Police as in P-O-L-I-S or P-O-L-E-I-S. So now we see where that governing body came from. The Dark Ages. And it literally means city in Greek. So the word police, P-O-L-I-S, P-O-L-E-I-S, literally means city in Greek. And it is very relative to a basin. As far as the discovery and the origin of them, or what they were eventually used for in some form or fashion. Now, in Greek, police means an administrative and or a religious city center as distinct from the rest of the city. So they were classifying the word basin originally and relating it to a police, which is a city, means a city. And it is an administrative center or religious center that is distinct from the rest of the city. It later came to mean the body of citizens under a city's jurisdiction. Let me recite that one more time. It later, the word police, which is relative to the word basin, later came to mean the body of citizens under a city's jurisdiction. Now you may say that means, yeah, they're under the laws of it. What if they're physically under it? Underground city. The ancient Greek cities in particular are very familiar, like the cities of Athens and its contemporaries, which relates to the city/state relationship, and the body of the citizens being under a city's jurisdiction. Even its contemporaries, as far as Atlantis, Athens, Atlantis, and this was classical, Greco, Persian, 5th to 4th century BC. And this is when things began to collapse during the Bronze Era, and it caused the ancient Greeks or Athens or Atlanteans to do what? Scatter. Because they started to not agree with the police, which was the city and its administration system that was formed in the 8th century. The police during this era were not like other primordial ancient cities. It was actually, they were ruled by a small oligarchy or a king, more so like, dictatorships or elite rulership, which is kind of like what's going on in Rome today with, of course, the Queen passed and now King Henry. They came from that kind of line, which is basically how other ancient cities prior to, not necessarily prior to, but adjacent to the time frame, near or after the time frame of that, the police, in regards to the Athens or the Atlanteans or any of the contemporary city/state police administrations in regards to basins, were instead political entities ruled by their bodies of citizens, as I stated before. So the people were ruling things at first, and then in came Greek democracy. And all of these things started to change when they went towards the Hellenistic era of classical antiquity. There's that word antiquity again that I've used quite a lot today. And it relates, of course, again to things or objects that are found outside of the time frame that they should exist in. Either they were found, they're being tested to be 10 million years old, and you're wondering, like, how could this possibly come up on the top of the earth after 10 million years? Like, it should be buried in sediments, which it should. So many so that it should be deeper than the circumnavigation system. But as you know, the system actually starts to do things at the base level itself, in which I have gone over, which is the seabed. So things can go or come from anywhere, inwards or outwards of the supposed territorial boundaries of the earth. And I say the boundaries of the earth because I wouldn't so much say that it's coming from the bottom of things, because the way that the tectonic plates work and the systems, of course, as volcanoes erupt and mountain ridges form, sediments build up and fill in, and lava begins to flow. Something from 10 million years ago probably would have been found by now. So the fact that things come up for so long ago, like in current times, in this time, that is considered an anachronism. Many of those city/states adopted the democratic form of government, as I stated, and that is where you had those that did not like it and they decided to scatter. Hence the basins. And basically they only allowed the males to make decisions during the era of Greek democracy and Hellenistic era of classical antiquity. Of course, that was the same way with our democracy for many years until women were allowed to vote. So a lot of the times people think, that the people in the past were so rare and so different. Maybe they were as far as their knowledge in certain areas about the earth. But for the most part, they're pretty much the same people, just a different lineage. Not lineage, but generation. History pretty much truly repeats itself. Which is weird when you think about the seabed expansion. Land repeats, time repeats, but some say that time does not exist, but you can live in maybe the past, the present, and the future all at the same time. Does that means that time does not exist? Probably not. Maybe it means that time is existing all together. But citizenship itself didn't come from those ancient Greeks or those Athenians or those Atlanteans. Citizenship actually derived from a Western civilization. And as they made their way again into the ancient Greek and classical antiquity periods, and making it more of a Greek democracy, of course, the inheritors scattered because they were not going for those new laws and the new policing system that had been formed, newly formed. So in part 2 of the documentary, I reiterated the meaning of the word basin, what its features do as far as bring in moisture. I also went back on the etymology and the origin of it as it relates to a city or a state and a government and people scattering due to the newly found democracy administration and how it relates to the times of the Hellenistic era of classical antiquity. So after separation of or from the old masters in the Alte Pina, correct that word, Alta or Alti Pina, which means fixed to a period short after the turn of the 19th century. And by fixed, that means that once they departed from the ancient form of government where basically the citizens were running the show, the citizens of the city/state, it became then a governmental body. And that is where they separated from basically the old masters, which was the new masters, because there were no masters in the beginning. But basically saying once they changed over to the Greek democracy, it stayed the same, which is why it says separation to the old masters in the Alta Pina, fixed to a period short after the turn of the 19th century. So it was fixed after that. That maybe they were going back and forward in the beginning, but of course democracy was there to stay and is still here today. Now, there was a king by the name of Ludwig after the 19th century, because as I stated, the Greek democracy or the Democratic Party basically embedded to stay. And so fast forward from the Hellenistic area of classical antiquity, a Bavarian king, at the time he was a crown prince, Ludwig began collecting contemporary art. And make sure you all are keeping the word antiquity as well as in the title the word Anachronism at the forefront. because I'm going to tell you how it relates to the basins right now in part 3 of this documentary. Ouverts or Ouverts, why are they laughing at us? And who are they? The Anachronism documentary. Louis I initially focused on German Romanticism paintings and the Munich school, the Germans, of course. And his collection began to enlarge, as he himself would have people to bring certain paintings and antiquities to him, which eventually accelerated, or should I say elevated, his presence. Even though he already was a crown prince in 1809, it basically led to the dynastic Greece second genitive of Bavaria in 1832. He would have painters as such as Karl Rotman to paint for him Greek landscapes. Remember, I stated that the police government within the Hellenistic era, actually through the Bronze era, began to evacuate the inheritors of that land, began to evacuate once the Greek Democrats moved in, which was basically the Europeans, in Perugia and Greek terracottas, and also coming from South Italy, they were coming in from. So during the World War II, the museum, they had a museum in which King Ludwig founded, which was titled the Alta Pinacothek, and the Pinacothek der Modern, meaning the modern Pinacothek. It is part of Munich's Kunsthalle, the art area. And during World War II, the museum lost especially a lot of its Etruscan pottery. And of course, Etruscan pottery was significant to the Bronze era, significant to the evacuation of the inheritors of that land, the original ones, during that period. The Etruscan pottery, which was stored in the new Pinacothek, ended up being destroyed. Allegedly, and this is documented, during World War II, the museum was bombed. The museum called New Pinacothek, the museum that was founded by the Crown Prince in 1809. And basically that was right after the time where they separated from the old policing process, which was for the citizens, and then everyone scattered and things of that nature. So after all of that, basically they were collecting, if you would like for me to put it together for you, they were collecting the antiquities of the inheritors of the land, the people who lived there in the city, in the state of the Athens or the Atlantean territories. They basically was digging up and getting all of their things because those people had scattered, which again, basin means to strain, also means to scatter. They were strained. They were basically pushed, strained out of their inherited lands, in which they inherited by birthright. So they scattered, which also is relevant to the term Schaterians. And of course, again, all of their antiquities were gathered up by these, what do you like to call it, expeditions that were taking place by different painters and stuff, even female painters and things of the nature. So clearly there was more of a land-based geological dig or search, more so than an oceanic one at that time. And of course, basins are or can be considered some form of land, just like the stretches of them in the western portion of North America. So why the King's Museum was bombed is very interesting to me. Clearly, there was some things up in there that maybe Japan wanted their hands on, and maybe they knew exactly where they were, and because they couldn't get them, or they knew that they were there and they were taken from certain places and being stored there, that is why they bombed the museum. I could probably guarantee that it was targeted, like who just bombs a museum by mistake. Yet I do believe that a lot of those antiquities made it out of that museum. And we have no history or no proof of who or what actually bombed that museum. There is just history that it was bombed and basically a say-so of it being the opposing person in the fight, which would happen to be Japan. And of course, they were coasting off of the Aleutian Islands. As I mentioned earlier, the Aleutian Islands are concurrent to the Russian and Alaskan area. And there is no definite mapping of them, yet the U.S. and Japan were using some of those islands to do missile launching from, and that's why there is a lot of bomb looking features within the Aleutians, i.e. illusion, because it goes on and on and on. Mountain ranges, plains, and I even saw a video with someone who was climbing over one of the mountains, and because you could literally see steam coming up from the black sand and stuff of the nature, him and his wife appeared to try to walk around the mountain, and they couldn't. To get to the other side, they wanted to go completely down and walk around, but they was only able to go down so far before they had to, of course, divert east or west instead of going all the way down to the bottom and then going, around. They had to scale basically the side of the mountain. They couldn't go down there because it was not safe, and the black sand or the water or whatever that substance was extremely hot, and so there was no getting to the other side of that to them. That's usually what happens in a game of Sims, because the islands, the mountains, the plains just keep going on and on forever, and it appears again to be a gap between the mountain ridges, but actually you're not always going to see a shelf. It's still underneath that water. It just happens to go down into a plain, and then it comes back up into the mountain ridges again, and it does the same thing over and over again, which is why it is able to maintain 50% of the Earth's sea land, which is the abyssal plain, PLAIN. So after the king gathered all of the inheritors' pottery, of course, as I stated, it was bombed. After they basically collected more than pottery, sculptures, paintings, everything from those inheritors through their policing tactics, which is some of the same things that kind of happened to the natives of different type of lands, even the Reds, Indians, the American Indians, and pretty much all members of people inhabiting the Aleutian Islands and southwestern Alaska. In other places in the world, but indistinctly those areas in correlation to the American Indians, the Red Indians, of course, were here before the Europeans, and the same thing happened as back during the World War II. Of course, those are the same people, maybe a generation or two off, so it's not that long. Where the natives or the inheritors of lands were scattered or removed or ran due to incoming viruses, threats, weaponization, and whatever else they brought along with them, with their policing administration, government bodies, and they left behind things, and either they were forced to leave them behind, or some things just were stolen from them, or just blatantly taken from them. So this instance right here dealing with the people that are relative to the basins, if known as people, if not known as whatever race that they were during those periods, it has already been confirmed. We went all the way back to the Hellenistic Antiquity periods, and you all know, if you are looking at Greek mythology, in which the basins are deriving from, and the origins of the Athenians and the Atlanteans, people thought that they were unlike regular people to begin with. People thought that they were people of one, great intelligence, as well as power, as in strength, as well as other supernatural abilities. Allegedly, of course, the museum, the new Panacothic, at that time was proclaiming to have its focus on European art of the 18th and 19th century. But I have clearly defined for you all how that is incorrect. It was not focused on European art. It was focused on the art that derived from the Etruscan Bronzes era, which is in line with the Greek terracottas, which is in line with the basins and the inheritors of that land, who were policed and scattered. Although, after the bombing of New Panacothic, of course, they built another building, and they named it, of course, the New Panacothic. It opened in 1981. And of course, the original museum, or the beginning time where the King Ludwig began to expand his memoir of photography, started in 1853 in Munich. And there are photos online of the original New Panacothic, in which was, or the old one, in which was located at coordinates 48 degrees north to 49 degrees north to 11 degrees east through 34 degrees east. Again, the original museum was founded by King Ludwig, Bavaria, 1853, constructed by Frederick von Gartner and August von Noit. That is Vonnoit. Again, it was destroyed in the World War II. Again, coincidentally, I think not. Especially not holding such prestigious antiquities of original people of a certain time and era. Also, as far as when the U.S. was trying to protect northern regions, you know that the U.S. did end up buying the buying the Aleutian Islands. They were sold to the USA, if not all of them, a portion. Indeed, in 1867 were sold to the USA, while the Commander Islands remained under Russian jurisdiction. In the Kamchatka, Petropar, Africa, which is around 8 degrees south to 34 degrees east, and Moscow, which is 55 degrees north to 37 degrees east. Very close to the Inuit people, which were known as the Eskimos, in which were also original people. And you can learn more about that in the Red Book of the Peoples of the Russian Empire. The Athenians wore armor from the 6th century BCE called a greave or a grave. And remember, the word basin derives from, at its earliest origin in etymology, in line with the Athenians and other contemporary cities and states and original people of those areas. It covered a citizen's soldier's knee and lower leg. So now they are saying the Athenians wore armor from the 6th century BCE. And we all know that the word basin at its earliest evolved from between the 6th century, between maybe the 3rd, 4th century and up, as I stated for you all. And the armor basically signifies social status and service to the community. And it also was a hoplites armor to protect, like I said, the soldier's knee and the lower leg. So now they're saying the Athenians wore armor in the 6th century. And if you haven't caught on by now, the Athenians clearly are the Schaterians, or direct descendants, nonetheless. And they wore those covered things, those covered armors around their knees and their lower legs. And they also were a part of different eras around that time, such as the Atlanteans. So, in which they someone had created, maybe they or someone who may have seen them, of course, created sculptures, because that is how art works. It goes off of things that you can visualize, whether you visually see it in reality or in your mind. That is what a painting is. So they actually had sculpted those greaves or graves, which were soldiers' knee and lower leg armor, specifically the Athenians. The state, i.e. state, collections of Antiquities Museum in Munich's Constable holding, Bavaria's collection of antiquities from Greece, Etruria, and Rome, located in the opposite. Cliptothek and works created in Bavaria are on display. So they said that a lot of those things got bombed, correct, when it came to what the king had acquired. But then they turned around and stated that some of those items were being held in state collections of antiquities museum in Munich's Constable holding, Bavaria's collection from Greece, Etruria, and Rome, located in the opposite Cliptothek. And so they obviously moved them to somewhere else. And as I go along, you guys will see that these objects have been moving all around the world. I don't know if somebody is out to get them or after them or what's going on, but they're seeming to move around a lot. Of course, one of the reasons may be financial gain on the party that is selling them, but also there appears to be still some storage going on today. Not there appears to be, in fact, there is. the king was still collecting antiquities even after his initial museum got bombed. So from the new building of his new museum, which his new building was built in 1853, now we move forward to the king still collecting collectibles. He had been collecting collectibles since he was a crown prince. Still, the bombardment was not well off enough because he still continued to collect collectibles such as attic vases. He had attic vases and he had pottery. He had golden garlands from Armento. He had Dionysus cups by Ezekiel Slurka, which was from 530 BC. He had a lot of items that were so old. Even the armor sculptures were from 500 BC. The Dionysus cup by Ezekiel Slurka, and correct me if you all know the correct pronunciation. A lot of these words are foreign origin, so bear with me. But those were also, basically it was a cup, and it also was from circa 530 BC. So do you all see how this man was in the 1800s getting his hands and acquiring things from 500 BCE? Now, allegedly, there were things that were being duplicated or things made to look like things and stuff of that nature. It was replica style museums going on. So was his museum all of the originals or was it a replica? But I know for sure that his catalog was eventually replicated, and I will tell you how that was done. But somehow he was basically getting his hand again on these antiquities, which were items that he should not have been able to have during the 1800s. Like, where are you getting things from the 500 BCE from? Please let me know down in the comment section, y'all, because I gave you all what I thought as far as the ever expanding earth, as far as things coming from further away lands that are not being plotted because they don't want to admit that we are in a system that kind of supports its own growth and expansion from a geological system that cannot be tampered with or was not created by man or can be explained by the Big Bang, because it's probably going to be one of the only places in the universe, if the earth is even in a part of the universe, that has that type of built-in system. And based on all of the alleged photos of the different planets, there's no such activity going on in those places. So the earth is 100% unique in every way. So King Ludwig the First, he had agents working for him as well, as I stated earlier, and one had the name of Frederick Thirsk, and he purchased one of the and multiple portions of the king's pottery. In basically, he purchased them from an estate of Lucien Bonaparte. The TSCHUD contribution brought between 190 and 194 extraordinary collection masterpieces of Impressionism to the museum. And these impressionable paintings showed advanced skilling in depictions of light. One of the painters that the king liked to use name was Claude Monet. That's Claude, Monet, Moneet. And she basically painted a photo of a sunrise in 1872, and it basically showed reflection on the water. You could literally see the sun at a low altitude, and it also showed the sun as gleaming on the ocean. Again, that is called the Claude Monet sunrise photo, and it was painted in 1872. And if you've made it to this part of the documentary, make sure you go and check out the community tab on there, because I will be uploading some pictures for the different things within the documentary in the community section of this YouTube channel. Now, those photos had light-changing qualities, open composition, and also they insinuated the effects of the passage of time. Now, if you're thinking about this is a lot of geographical type of things. They're like showing exactly what they're looking at during that time period. So these were paintings, original paintings of visual perception, and I believe that is exactly what the creators, or the creator gods, are the inheritors of this earth, the original ones, were laughing at, or are laughing at, basically, which is our human perception of things. And it's just weird. Those paintings also were showing unusual visual angles, and inclusion of movement as a crucial element of human perception and experience. So, movement started being of great importance in the 1800s. I don't know why they had got so prone to being overwhelmed with movement. But Impressionism originated with a group of Paris-based artists whose independent expeditions brought them prominence during the 1870s and the 1880s. Again, I went over that earlier, how once the king began to acquire these antiquities, his stature went even higher, even though he was already a crowned prince. His precedence as the king was much higher because he owned such valuable, expensive, priceless antiquities from the earliest settlers in, or inheritors of, natural born of an area, which happened to be obviously the Athens, the Athenians, or the Atlanteans, or what maybe they coined themselves as being, or history coined them as being, the Schaterians. So, impressionists, basically, they want to impress you. That's what an impressionist photo is. It's something that is meant to impress you. But based on the impressionism theory, or the details, back then, it wasn't to impress you. It was literally painters and artists and architects going around on expeditions, physically painting what they seen with their eyes visually, which was basically a mixture between painting and revolution. And it even, some of the paintings he acquired in the Impressionism category even included some by Claude Monet, which was the same artist that King Ludwig got his Impressionist paintings from. They were the group of the Paris-based artists whose alleged independent expeditions helped bring prominence to the king, as well as Paris, where they were stationed. And there is a close relationship between Paris and the Bavarian king and the Museum of Antiquities. So the group from Paris of explorers, or exhibitors, or should we say agents, also developed their own collectional museum in Paris. So he still had his, of course, in Bavaria, Germany. So the museum in Paris held Impressionist and post-Impressionist masterpieces. So they had their hands on some really good stuff. The King Ludwig, he had, as far as also to the first king, to the third king, they had been collecting antiquities. But the museum in Paris held also Impressionist and post-Impressionist masterpieces. So, meaning that they kind of can span the photographic history through those photos of what was actually being seen. And this is relative to clearly the way that everything is adding up, that there may be some photos of some basins. And is those photos the same photos that they are saying were craters at the time? It's clearly something to see in these photos, and we may get the chance to see them. And I'm going to tell you how. Now, many of them was held in the Galerie Nationale du Jeu de Pommes prior to the museum's opening in 1986, which was the museum in Paris. They were being held in a national gallery. So earlier at the Beaux Arts railway station, these photos were moving around, basically hiding history in Europe. And Musée d'Orsay, which was established in 1986, happened to be the location of Rue de Lille, which is 75343 Paris, France. And you may want to research that zip code and see what could have happened during 1986. Also, there is something very peculiar about the year of 1984, as well as it regards to the king. But furthermore, they ended up naming the museum in Paris the Musée d'Orsay. That is Musee D apostrophe capital Orsay, Musée d'Orsay, which is basically the Museum of Orsay. And within it, the king also had Paris, of course, one of the people that was within the group of agents, traveling agents, painters, whatever you would like to call them. They also helped to do the architecture of the Musée d'Orsay. And it basically is built like a tunnel or a dome because it is an old railway station. And remember, I talked about railroads earlier and how the basins and the fault lines and the shelves and things of that nature line up adjacent, just like train tracks. So how ironic would this museum be to be built in a railroad station? And that railway could possibly lead to underground places, maybe within or beneath basins or further in the ground. Possibly. Very ironic. Also, it was said to be built on the site of Paleos. Paleosis, or something similar to Police d'Orsay or Paris for Camus. The station was constructed for the Chemin de Fer de Paris of Orleans. And it was finished in time for the 1900 Exposition Universelle to the design of 3 architects. Those architects were Lucien Magne, Emile Bernard, and Victor Laloux. And the design was considered to be an anachronism itself, based off of the traits of modern transportation, which at that time railway was the prestige way to go. And it probably near the only way at that time besides carriage and all of those type of things. So of course, as they learned about fault lines, they learned about railways, which is where the whole adjacent idea of transportation scoped the railways. And that's why people of knowledge knows that the railways systems actually have been here forever. It's not a new concept. It's not a new thing. As above, so below. After 1939, the railway was used for suburban services. As I stated, that is when they started to travel by the train. So in 1970, no, not 1970, but just prior, which was in 1986, as I stated, they established the Musée d'Orsay. And then from 1986 to the 1900s, they began to change things up. So they began to use the museum / train station for suburban services and as a mailing center during World War II, which was after 1939. Now, the meaning of World War, and this one right here, when I was talking to you all about the railway, I may have skipped a little bit forward, but all the information is still in line. That just happened to happen. Well, yeah, that is correct. It's still the same. Okay, so after, as I stated earlier, the Ouverts railway station was basically the new founding place for all of these documents that the explorers, the Paris agents were collecting. They basically moved them below ground. Of course, they needed them to be somewhere safe, so where else but a railway station. And of course, that railway station, only certain people could ride it at the time. It was based on social status, somehow color and things of that nature as well back then. And so after World War II, they was also using that as a mailing center. So there was transportation, there was stuff coming in and stuff going out of there basically, as well as people of prestigious status such as King Ludwig and people who would actually attend auctions. So this place was not just a regular train station or a museum. It was actually a place where the elites were meeting up to do auctions to buy these antiquities that didn't belong to any of them in the beginning. As far as the natural ones they were finding, as far as sculptures and all of these things of that nature, all the way back from the 500s BCEs. Like, I don't understand how they ended up being owned by the king. He wasn't a government, although they may want to act like as such, but he still had full ownership of those things. And as I stated, these items were being sold. They should have never been able to be. Of course, the government wasn't what it is now, what it is then, but in a form or fashion, it's exactly the same. So, the meaning of World War means exactly that. It was a war of worlds, or a war of the world, 1939. So, the real World War, basically they used it for, or it was aimed toward securing geographic locations, parts of the world, the far north Russia, and places off to the far northwest. They were fighting over basically those territories. So, as well as other things, clearly due to the bombing of the museum, Then later, after they were using it for suburban services and a milling center during the World War. After that, they started using it for films and rituals. Hence, of course, the continuation and the start of what is known as the television and all of the deceptive messages and visualizations and stuff like that have been incorporated into these films slash rituals. And a lot of that stuff, when you think about it now, think about it, they started using that train station for films, i.e. rituals. And where do you think they was getting all of these sci-fi ideas from? Do you think they just thought of these creatures or these things just out of thin air? Somebody seen something somewhere. And they may have seen a lot of things in these paintings that those people that were going around actually were seeing with their eyes back during those times. All the way back to the sculptures and stuff back from the BCE age. Clearly, at some kind of way, there was documentation of the early inheritors, more so than they are allowing us to know about, in my opinion. Now, the Kafka's The Trial, adapted by Orson Welles, Orsonwelles, Renaud Baroque Theater Company, and auctioneers. As I stated, they were doing all of that, their bidding of paintings while the Hotel Drouot was being built. So this place moved from supposed to be a storage for our museum to a modern transportation hub for the elites and a mailing center of stuff in and out, probably expensive antiquities, whether they are from the past or the future, that have been collected by these explorers who had the chance to scatter across the world and basically grab in and get whatever they wanted to. And after all of that, they began work in the 1970s on a building, a 1 kilometer long tunnel under the station. So the station is still there and still has its history, its energy, probably its hidden storage vaults and locations. But they began to build in the 1970s on a building, a 1 kilometer long tunnel under the station. So before, clearly the tunnel was not above the station, but I'm pretty positive they probably started digging some of that tunnel prior to that part, and maybe people just didn't know that there were underground probably vaults and stuff like that where they were probably holding some of the greatest impressionist paintings of them all. Someone was learning a whole lot about adjacent features as well as underground excavations and underground building of like tunnels and stuff. Like, this wasn't something that was modern at the time. Again, some of the stuff that they had going on even earlier when they first even had built the train station, the things that they were doing were antiquous, meaning outside of the time frame based on that current technology. It was like an instant, and that's why things seem like they go so doggone rapidly. Things have been seen, things have been said, things are known. Knowledge comes from somewhere, a central place. You don't just get deja vu out of nowhere. It is a subconscious feature to the human psyche, either from existing in the past, the present, or the future. Although you are using your subconscious or mind, or should I say you're not using it, because some people can use their subconscious mind directly by trying to use it, and sometimes the subconscious mind just works on its own. So that just depends, I would say, on what level of vibration you are on as well, or what mental dimension you are existing within. The tunnel under the station was a part of the creation of Line C of the Reseau Express Regional, RESEAU, Resway or SWU Express Regional, with a new station under the old one. In 1970, permission was granted to demolish the station, but Jacques Duhamel, Minister for Cultural Affairs, ruled against the plans to build a new hotel instead. Instead of building, of course, the new museum. So the station was put on the supplementary list of historic monuments and finally listed in 1978. So understand, guys, that I have took you all the way from the BC all the way up to now. This situation and the stuff that went on with the Athenians / the Scandinavians is still present, omnipresent today. The actions of that police administration that caused those people to scatter. And yet, those generations revel in their antiquities. But all of that is about to get ready to change. And we are almost at the end of our documentary. It may be about, I'm going to try to finish it up in about 2 hours, but I hope that you all are enjoying it because this is my first documentary. Rather long, may I say so myself. So after the Minister for Cultural Affairs ruled against the plans to build the new hotel, he wanted to build the new hotel instead. The station was put again on a supplementary list of historic monuments and finally listed in 1978. Of course, it would be listed as being a part of a historic monument and finally added to the list, even though it was just a train station, because it was not just a train station. It was probably some form of a lodge for the wealthy. That's pretty much what it sounds like. And a storage place for antiquities of the most rarest form, and an auction house as well for the elites. So why supplementary? Because the majority of the actual antiquities also at that time had already been bought and sold and or auctioned to the king, Ludwig, and the other elites who would travel to and fro the station, hence the form of transportation, who would be sent packages, hence the mailing process during the World War II. And it was just a lot of things that were being collected probably on both parts. So I don't know. As I stated, it was over territory and stuff like that. Did Japan get upset that they got the Germans got those things first, or was in affiliation clearly with the Europeans? And that is the reason why they bombed the original museum that was in line with King Ludwig. I don't know. You guys tell me what you think about that. But I don't think they destroyed all of that, all of those things. They probably removed all of that out of there prior to. Maybe that's maybe people knew that those items were there at that time, and in order to make it seem a certain way to the public, maybe that's what went on. I don't know, because you have to take things for face value these days when it comes to past history. But the unique things about those impressionist paintings is they were based off of things that these explorers or agents were actually going around visually seeing with their own eyes. So that is a little bit completely different than a story that can be told about how something happened on a battlefield. So the idea to turn it into a museum came from the Directorate of the Museum of France. And it was a plan commissioned in 1974 and awarded contract, which involved creating 220,000 square feet of new floor on 4 floors. Construction carried out by Boygus in 1981. The interior was designed by Gay Alanti, a central Navi. 1986, it was ready at that point to receive exhibits. So it went from a auction house to a transportation hub to a museum, because they basically, as I stated, was already storing antiquities there and already facilitating in the exportation and maybe the receivables of them as well during the World War II. So it took 6 months to install 2,000 or so paintings, 600 sculptures, and other works. President Francois Mitterrand officially opened the museum in 1986. Years after the 5 years after the new Pinakothek opened in 1981 in Munich, Germany. So while the king had to get his museum rebuilt, in which he had rebuilt and opened in 1981 in Munich, Germany, 5 years after that, the explorers, who were the ones that were going around collecting these antiquities and selling them to the king, decided we're probably selling him all of these goods and stuff of that nature. We're going to create our own. And that is what happened 5 years after the new Pinakothek was built in Germany. They built one. Well, they built their own museum 5 years later in Paris. So it was said to be a 1:100 scale model, or one created by Richard Paducci or Paducci. It's either a 1:100 or a 1:1000 scale model created by Richard Paducci of AV area view. So the model was created in the form of an area view of Paris, opera, and surrounding, encapsulated underneath glass flooring that viewers walk on as they proceed to the museum. So basically, the new floors of the train station, i.e. the museum, you'll be able to get an aerial view of Paris by looking around. So it's going to look like you're basically in Paris, even though you're within the train station itself. That's going to have, of course, the underground floors and stuff of that nature. The floors are going to be made of glass. So it's basically like a imagery in painting, like you're standing in a painting. And we see that today. They have some of those, I know, in Texas and different states, where they are making like these rooms that seem very real. It's like you're inside of a painting, and I think that's basically what they want to reinvent. Or actually, if you think about it, I just caught them with another Anachronism. Because how in the world were they even at that time thinking about in the 1980s about making things look like an actual painting room and look like aerial view and things of that nature. Now, aerial view, that's fine, cool, and dandy. But as far as the painting room, like, that is something that has just started happening within the last 5 years, really, on a steady basis. So yeah, this definitely some very anachronistic type things going on at that train station and with those paintings. And a lot of people think that there is a machine that can tell people the future, but what if it's no machine? It's just simply looking at the artifacts that have came from, who knows, the east or west, wherever they've came from, and they found them in by excavating the lands and digging in oceans and everywhere these things have came from, which gives light to my earlier theory, the sea level expansion theory, where I'm pushing more towards that we are the actual new world in a form or fashion. And why I would say that is because a lot of the things that were built back then, we don't even know how they were built. So clearly, they were far more advanced. And the only way for them to hypothetically have been far more advanced, which everyone in the world has been trying to figure out for decades and decades and decades through scientific analysis of how they made a lot of these things happen. They just can't explain it because they were ahead of us. I don't know if I want to say intelligibly, but maybe in some form or fashion, and maybe even in time itself. If we were to define time based on the geographic clock of the earth, there's something about the thing around. They proclaim that the earth moves around. It doesn't. The waters on the earth moves around, hence the southern circumnavigation, northern circumnavigation convergent system. Why is this relevant? Because it all relates to the people below or outside of the given limited boundaries, and the time that they were above the ground before scattering, and the antiquities and knowledge that they possess, as well as what they may have looked like or anything. We don't know what they have. Again, because these antiquities were starting to be collected all the way starting from the 3rd to the 6th to BC. Like so long ago, starting from the first king, second, third, like the Lutwing we are talking about is like the third Lutwing. The first one was already, you know, collecting collectibles as a crown prince. And back then, I don't know if they changed their names to the second or the third based on if they were still living during a certain area or what. But the way that things are counted these days are completely different from back then. It will make you believe that this person, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, is different people, when in fact that actually means different time frames, different decades, or different centuries. Basically, eras, like the Chinese dynasty. You can live through several or be within one dynasty and another, but you will still be basically the same person. Which is why in like Greek mythology, there are so many deities that are basically the same people. They just have different names. The architectural painting, and basically what they were trying to put across to the audience was the original idea of the city planning of Paris at the time. So it's what they wanted it to look like. That they were basically mimicking these glass see-through floors, and things of that nature. Where did they see things like that before? It's interesting to me. They were thinking about see-through floors in the 1980s. I find it very interesting. But the train station happens to be one of the most popular attractions, i.e. museums. So the Marlene and Spencer Hayes collection consists of 600 art pieces, and it was donated by art collectors in Texas who have been collecting since the early 1970s. Since World War II, France had not been donated a collection of foreign art this large. And majority of the collection favors most impressionist works. The real impression is hidden in the somehow $1 million homes or layers or below the Vatican or wherever. But It even includes paintings from John Baptiste or Camille Corot. Change names of one name. Of course, Camille is a man. You would think that that would be a woman name, but he was a landscape slash portrait painter, printmaker in etching, neoclassical tradition. And he specialized in like air innovations, plain to air, PLAIN to air innovations of Impressionism. Born in 1796 and died in 1875 in Paris, France. So how did he get them? The plain air antiquities. So the Musée d'Orsay, basically the Orsay Museum, is scheduled to undergo a radical transformation over the next decade, which started in 2020. And the remodel is being funded by an anonymous U.S. patron who donated 20 million, whatever you want to call the currency, in London, euros, Paris money, to a building project known as Orsay Grand Ouvert, or Ouvert, which means the wide open Orsay. So that was an article also that was in the New York Times. Again, an anonymous party donated 20 million euros to the project building known as Orsay Grand Ouvert, i.e. the wide open Orsay, which is going to be transforming what we have went over, which originally was a train station, to a actual full-scale museum that is going to be a replica basically of the collection that the king had started collecting, which came from the inheritors of the land that they got the items from, along with other lands, but more so over those lands as they relate to that time period, the Athens and the Schaterians. So it was basically said to be a gift made via the American Friends of Musées d'Orsay, A.D. L'Orange, meaning it was a gift made by the American Friends of the Museum et de l'Orange. And it has a projected completion year of 2026. So again, what we are looking forward to in the modern day, now that we have went through the centuries and the years following along with these items, is the Marlene and Spencer Hayes collection, which is 600 art pieces, which were again donated by art collectors in Texas who had been collecting since the early 1970s. So this is clearly 2023. So that would make them, if they were young, still probably between maybe their 50s or their 80s or something. So these are some people who got their hands on some stuff probably passed down from their parents. Again, this is a generational thing as far as the people on the receiving end and as far as the people on the extradition end. The people who had to end up scattering due to basically the grab ends of their antiquities. So they are going to be showcasing, it appears to be 600 of these pieces. Now, are these pieces replicas? That is a possibility, but somewhere the originals lie dormant. So we will just have to wait to see what comes out of them, but I'm definitely going to be looking forward to it, because I want to see some of these wide open things that these exhibitors seen on their journeys. Since World War II, France has not been donated anything. So, especially a collection of foreign art this large. And they're saying, of course, 600 pieces, that is pretty large. And where have they been storing this at? Because they're talking like this is, they said the Marlene and Spencer Hayes collection how did they get their hands on it? Which is why I stated earlier, these items were so unique to the inheritors of the land so far at the beginning of creation, near the cradle of creation. No pun intended, not speaking about Africa, but creation as we know it of our planet, the very beginning, that is some of the most prestigious things. So it wasn't clearly all handed to a museum. I didn't hear anything about the king put his stuff in an North American museum or something like that. Now, yes, he had a museum in Germany, in Russia, Germany. How is it operating today? Is all of the items there or not? Did he save some items, pass it down to his family? Pretty sure he did. That's probably how the Marlene and Spencer Hayes family ended up probably collecting and passing down their pieces, which I'm hoping is of the actual antiquity, the Hellenistic antiquity or antique period, and not some replicas, which I'm sure will be able to be verified based on whatever metrics that they use to test materials and things of that nature. But again, the word Ouvert or Ouvert, Overt. You can also say it like overt. Kind of like it means, of course, in relativity, basin, a basin, and an overt or an ovate is just basically an opening, a split, a porous geological feature that causes condensation and evaporation of moisture, whether it is rain or snow or any kind of vapors. It evaporates or it goes down into the earth's crust using a process called seeping. So poetry added history of the earth, prospectively based more so than impressionable based. A visual sighting isn't an impression. It's nearly a reincarnation of an optical experience. So to pass these items off, if they are indeed genuine and come from the Hellenistic antiquity period and are relative to the time frame of the Athenians and the Schaterians, this is going to be one of the greatest collections to be released in modern day history. So, again, overt also means a movement which brings things apart. It can also stand for an open crouch. Overt, ovate also can mean faucet. Equals, of course, underwater, and I found that quite interesting. The synonym for basin and overt based on, or ovate based on the translation from the Cambridge Dictionary, equates to faucet. So again, it is constantly reiterating that the vapors or the water or the snow or whatever is coming down. And when you think about a faucet, the faucet comes, when you turn on the water, it goes down the drain. That's basically all it's saying, that it's going down the drain. But it also filters, because a faucet does filter. It may not filter to the extent if you buy an extra filter to put on it, but all faucets originally have that little threading filter built into it to catch heavy or larger materials. And that is exactly what the basins do. They strain whatever particles and moisture that they want, and they seep down into the earth's crust. And where they go from there, again, is a mystery. But based on the definition, they do not go, the water does not go into the ocean, contrary to belief. So, Ouvert or Ouvert can also mean one eyes open. So it means with one's eyes open, meaning open-minded, to be tolerant. And Ouvert is what they are calling this collection, well, this museum that should be done being reconstructed, which was the train station, and it should be done being reconstructed by 2026. But that is the new name. It's going to be the new name. It's not the new name right now for the museum that used to hold auctions for and be in close relativity to the prior king's lineage through auctioning of antiquities. So its purpose, allegedly, with the release of this vast collection, is meant to be frank, open, and ready, basically, to spark and allow entry into what we have basically been neglected from, because that history doesn't belong to any of us, to be exact. So, in French, ouverts or ouvert means lingerie as well, bottoms with a completely open rear and no coverage, which is basically what a basin is. It is an opening with no coverage. So, the fact that they, again, are naming this museum, the new one, well, they have named it since 2020, have started reconstructing it. The fact that they named it the Grand Ouvert, which means the grand opening or the wide opening, is crazy, especially as it relates to basins and the etymology and the origin of everything I have discussed with you all today in this documentary. So, the anonymous funding of the building project, known as Orsay Grand Ouvert or Orsay Wide Open, knows exactly what these paintings will reveal in 2026. Hence the reason why they may want to remain anonymous, because they're probably a family that probably had some of these items or know a little bit about something, but they are remaining anonymous for a reason, because probably the stuff that may be released in this batch, as the name of the museum is called, is gonna open wide some eyes, and I am ready for it. Peekaboo. Now, also, last but not least, an Ouvert or a seal means to be ruthless, and exploitation miniere, and it also has something to do with open cast mining, open air theater. Now make sure you all do a little research of your own over everything that I've said in this documentary. Feel free to ask me any questions down in the comment section. Also, do some research on open cast mining, because it relates to the basins. And do you think we are basically living in the first, second, third, fourth, or the fifth world? Do you think we are, if you have to have it one way or the other, based on sea level expansion and the Earth's reconstructive abilities? If we are in the new or the old world? In French, also, the word Ouvert or Ouvert, which is very relevant to, is a synonym of the word basin, also means a bird's eye view. For some reason, those basins are shaped like eyes. That's weird. And the word sky just kept coming up to me, and it was relaying to the word sky, which I said also is in relation to basin, meaning to scatter. But it also appears to be in relation to the sky. So skey in relation to the word sky, in relation to bird's eye view, in relation to the geographic feature of a basin. Also can go into an open box, an outrepasser, to go beyond one's right. Synonym for that was abuser for some reason. It also has open starvey or movement. These are just words that I affiliated at the end as references for Basin and its origins. And for the most part, in closing, the spirit of a Ouverture is someone who is willing to accept new ideas or changes, also can rationalize knowledge of an idealized perception. Yes, so it's an overture spirit. And the spirit of an Ouverts person, again, is the willingness to accept new ideas or changes, or having a rational knowledge of an idealized perception, in which I feel that I have accomplished here today. So hopefully with the completion of the museum, hopefully, I don't know if it's going to be shown online, if they're going to show everything to the public online, or if you're going to have to actually take a trip to Paris to see these paintings. But if you're able to do so, make sure you come back and let us know. I'm definitely going to be following along with the story. Of course, as again, the purpose of this documentary and the title is relevant to the Ouverts or Ouverts or Ouverts as they relate to the basins of the world, the expansion of sea bed crust, meaning the creation of more land through the Earth's, I'm gonna coin, sim process, and the mystery of these anachronisms that have been basically traveling around for centuries. So how they were so greatly preserved, I don't know. I told you all that one of the museums where they were originally being held were bombed during World War II, which is really weird. Obviously, the king had some things going on back when with between the United States as well and Japan. I don't see why they would bomb a museum that's in Germany, unless, of course, as I stated, they were operating with the Europeans. They were the ones that, the Europeans, the Londons, were actually the ones who were bringing the antiquities to the king. So, as I stated, I don't know if Japan found out about what was going on, and that is how the original place got bombed. Were they able to get majority of the stuff out? Were they able to get any of it out? Or are they passing around replicas? Anachronisms, last but not least, also relate to hidden figures and the best of enemies. How ironic is that? And I also found a basically like a little salutation from Meredith George in relation to anachronisms, and basically better that it is should not have consented to motion and have held stubbornly to all ancestral ways than have bred that anachronic spectra. Again, better that it should not have consented to motion and have held stubbornly to all ancestral ways than have bred that anachronic spectra. Meredith George. Last but not least, there is a educational video game, and as you all seen that I mentioned the game Sims several times throughout the documentary, because it is very similar to the process that is occurring here on Earth. I would also like to figure out a little bit more background behind the genealogy of the person that created the Sims. But as far as the Impressionists go, as it relates to anachronisms and the paintings. There is a video game, and it is exactly titled Les Impressionnistes, and it was created in 1997, an educational video game. It was focused on and developed by the French developer Index Plus as a production with B. Reunion des Musées Nationaux. So basically the developer is Index Plus, and the creators, her name, or the developer, is Claire Barbillion. Claire, Claire, Barbillion, Barbillon. And it was, I don't even know if it's still in production, but if so, I'm definitely going to get a hold of one of them like today. But it is a Windows 95 Macintosh program, so not sure if it'll be able to probably work on your current system, but if you can locate an older system, maybe on eBay or something like that, maybe you can get it together. Or maybe you can find a virtual online edition of the game. But again, it is titled Les Impressionnistes, and it is by Claire Barbillion, Windows 95 Macintosh, from an idea from the Museum of Orsay. And it uses QuickTime technology. So basically, it features 200 works of art from 45 artists. And basically, two other names that are relative to this game are Andre Dussolier and James Daly. And this game was also talked about in the San Francisco Examiner. Again, it is called Les Impressionnistes, and it mimics the Musée d'Orsay Museum in Paris, France, on the left bank of the Seine, and housed by the former Gare d'Orsay Able Arts Railway Station, built between 1898 and 1900. Nearly 20 years after the reconstruction of the new Pinacothèque, consisting of mainly French art dating from 1848 to 1914. Paint, sculptures, furniture, and photography houses the largest collection of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist masterpieces in the world. So notice, this was created in 1997, but as you've seen, as we went back all the way again centuries, we've seen that antiquities have been being collected throughout the beginning of it all, as far back as one can note, through the single digits of the BC. So for this game to have been created in 1997 and supposed to be basically a mockery or a mimic of the Musée d'Orsay, which was the stuff that was said to be in the train station, of course, that was built in housing and doing auctioning of these antiquities, and its people, the explorers or the agents, were in close relation, of course, to the German king, Ludwig, are saying that the game itself mimics that, but the games, the paintings are only consistent with art dating from 1848 to 1914. Yet it says it houses the largest collection of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist masterpieces in the world. At the time that the antiquities were collected, they were seen as anachronism. So probably if they were something that was created in 1848 to 1914, I don't really see that as being an anachronism, because we're not that far off from 1848 to 1914 enough to be like, oh, we shouldn't have found that. Like, you can find things very easily, I would say, within 100 to 200 years. So to me, that's not a anachronism. And again, based on that video game, but clearly they knew no better, because they would know that that the Musée d'Orsay is said to have structures, sculptures, and portraits and stuff that go all the way back to 500 BCE. So that was about it, you all, for my first documentary titled The Ouverts, or the Ouverts. Why are they laughing at us, and who are they? And I've came to the basically the conclusion that they're laughing at us because of our human perception, just like that that salutation message that I read to you all that was relative, that we should have never started believing things would move in motion, because basically you're causing confusion in human perception, because you have taken on this stance that things are moving and based because they wanted to show movement so bad in those photos and photography and stuff, that they really think that we are always supposed to be in motion, when in fact Meredith George stated better that it should not have been consented to motion and have held stubbornly to all ancestral ways than have bred that anachronic spectra, or unachronic spectra, une. So sounding a whole lot like we shouldn't have believed in that spherical motion stuff, because it's actually completely different from what we think. And I think I pretty much covered everything for you all to gather what it is and what it isn't, or what it should be, or the things that you may should question, i.e. seafloor spreading. The NIWA's limitations on sea crust expansion, the Athenians and the Schaterians, the King Ludwig, who was the one that basically was getting all of the antiquities in, and also the current event that's coming up with the release of 600 alleged items of antiquity. So again, thank you for watching, and this documentary turned out to be a whole lot longer than I thought. I guess that is a good thing. I hope you all enjoy listening, and go and do your own research. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section. Thank you.